The thing that I see on the Facebook group that worries me is so many people want to go local. They want to find the local person, the local surgeon. This condition, in my mind, is serious. You want to find the best person that you can afford. I was willing to go to Greece. Not everyone's willing to go to Greece. That's fine. But this is not something that you want to take the most convenient way out. You want to find the best person you can possibly find, both for diagnosis and for surgery. Because you don't want to do this surgery twice. If you want to do it once, don't try to go cheap or go fast. This is not a convenience thing. This is get it right.
Welcome to Imperfect Heart, a place for you to join me, Jeff Holden, in conversations, discussions, and dialogue about our hearts and the impact myocardial bridges have on them. We'll talk with healthcare professionals, those in related fields that support our condition, and others just like us with stories of their myocardial bridge experiences. It's my intention for this content to inform, educate, entertain, and even motivate or inspire you in your personal journey on dealing with a myocardial bridge. Most importantly is to have you leave each episode with hope, knowing you're not alone and that what you're experiencing is real. Not far from the soothing surf, sandy beaches, and lusciously green golf courses, you may be able to find my next guest walking the campus of Florida Atlantic University, or possibly cycling to or from his home in Boca Raton, Florida. It wasn't long ago, however, when none of those options were open to him. An Atlanta native, Louis Merlin has lived all over the country. It was when he was attending Yale University that he first met his wife, Ki Wing. However, it wasn't until they met again in San Francisco that something clicked. After several career detours, Louis finally found his calling in urban planning and is now a professor at Florida Atlantic. His three sisters are scattered across the country, and I'm sure they were challenged to keep up with him as he went through his myocardial bridge dance for diagnosis over the course of several years. He enjoys hiking, yoga, and participation in his Unitarian Universalist congregation, which all came to a halt not that long ago. His story may not have been told if not for his persistence and self-advocacy to not only keep hope alive, but literally a semblance of quality of life alive. Louis, welcome to the program. Louis, I'm extremely excited to have you on the program today and really looking forward to the conversation. Welcome.
Thank you so much. I have to say, since I've been, suffering from myocardial bridge, I've been listening to your programming. Thrilled to be on here.
Well, I appreciate that. Some of us get hit with our symptoms. It's like a freight train, and everything seems to come on intensely at one point, and then there's others who we've spoken with who have been experiencing symptoms for 20 plus years, and they didn't know if it was significant, if it was really a problem. And then there's people like yourself. You're kind of somewhere in the middle. You've been experiencing symptoms, but not significant enough. You've been in and out of the hospital, again, but not significant enough. And a diagnosis certainly wasn't appropriate for what you were really looking for. Tell me what it was you were dealing with and when it really started.
Yeah, it really started sometime in my mid-30s. I started to get these episodes of chest pain. Sometimes more than chest pain, sometimes chest pain, dizziness, sometimes headache. In fact, sometimes a headache would be worse than chest pain. And, it wouldn't go away. And I didn't know what it was. And I have heart disease in the family. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to go to the ER and get this checked. Mm-hmm. And I would go to the ER, my blood test, and they find nothing in the blood. It's some other tests. And, after a while, they would just say, there's nothing wrong with you. You're fine. There's no problem. And it would happen again and again. I over about 10 or 15 years, I ended up going to the ER at least 10 times, pretty much like once a year, maybe once every 2 years, getting tested. And it was always, it's fine. I actually started to think it's just anxiety. I really started to believe it's just anxiety because they never found anything. And then in 2017, I had another one of these episodes. And I guess maybe I was getting a little older, so they were thinking it's more serious. And I got my first CT scan, and they come back to me and say, there's nothing wrong with your heart's perfect. In fact, you have a calcium score of 0, nothing, no buildup. But you have a myocardial bridge, but they're completely benign. That's exactly what it says. You have a myocardial bridge, but they're completely benign. You don't have to think about it again. We want you to see a cardiologist. So I started seeing a cardiologist, and I started taking metoprolol, but I pretty much believed exactly what they said. I believed exactly what they said.
And there are healthcare professionals. Of course we would. That's what you expect. And who knows what this thing is, this myocardial bridge. And I think everybody that's listening that's had this diagnosis is saying, yeah, they said the same thing to me. It's exactly what they said. You've got this thing, but it's a benign condition. Don't worry about it. You'll be fine.
I guess I wish they had said, sometimes these myocardial bridges cause angina. Don't even make it sound serious. Just help me know that there's a connection between the symptoms I'm feeling and my physical condition, my biological condition. Because I didn't even know that. So I thought it was all in my head.
Yeah. And in some cases, we also know that that's the expectation as well. This is in your head. It's anxiety. You're just stressed. You have a difficult job or a challenging job, or you name it. There's a million reasons that you can come up with anxiety.
Yeah.
So what happens next? You're now in 2017, 2018-ish?
Yeah. So I think what happened next is I had become accustomed to having a certain amount of pain and just being like, okay, that's just that thing. I'm just ignore it. And I was on metoprolol, and I was seeing a cardiologist every 6 months. And mostly I was fine. I was fully active. I was able to exercise. Didn't really have any problem until really December of 2022, which is when I started to have every day, not just, once every 6 months. I started to have pain every day. And for the first time, I started to have pain, chest pain with exertion. Up until then, when I exercised, I actually felt better. But then I'm on my bike, I'm getting chest pain while on my bike, and it's getting worse as I'm biking more. And I'm like, this is definitely my heart, right? I mean, what else could that be?
I want to step back for a second, because when we first talked prior to the conversation, you were clear to say, I see you have some athletes on and certainly yourself, a little bit different. And I'm not one of those guys. I ride to work and I ride for pleasure, but it's not like I'm going out and riding 100 miles and all that sort of thing. And I think that's important to state too, because again, people might hear, well, you're on your bike, he's another crazy cyclist and, doing, 100 milers and stuff like that. But yours was just more for recreation and transportation, right?
Yeah. So I live close to work. So it's about a 4-mile ride to work. So I used to bike, about 20 minutes there, about 20 minutes back, just to keep in shape. I am by no means a super athlete. I'm just trying to stay healthy like the rest of us.
Yeah. How much would you say you were riding?
Yeah, I mean, pretty much that. I mean, so it's
miles-ish.
Yeah, so maybe 4 out of 5 days I'd bike, round trip 8 miles. So
okay.
I remember my doctor saying, "Oh, that's great. You're biking to work. You're being really healthy, doing all the things you're supposed to be doing, right?" But yeah, I was never any kind of competitive or even semi-competitive athlete.
And in terms of the chest pain, what was the experience? Can you help us understand a little bit more what that sensation was that you were getting?
Yeah, it's interesting. For me, it's always been literally exactly over the heart. Usually what I would call a dull ache. In later phases, I started to have pain in other places, but for most of it, it was literally right over the heart. And over time, it got more and more severe and intense. I also mentioned I sometimes have some dizziness, and I also, as the symptoms got worse, often had shortness of breath. In fact, before my daily symptoms, before the symptoms became chronic, I had several months where I was waking up early in the morning, short of breath. I would like go on a walk and be like, what is this? Is this in my head? Is this a medication I'm taking? It was scary. Shortness of breath is a very scary symptom because it's like, how do you fix it? You know, how do you recover from not having enough oxygen? So
Right.
I had absorbed all the information from the doctors, and I assumed that it wasn't serious and it wasn't my heart. But looking back, it was absolutely my heart. It was absolutely my heart saying, I'm not getting enough oxygen.
Right. And so now we're almost current. We're in 2023, and you decide something has to happen. I'm at the point of desperation. This is not acceptable, and it's something's wrong.
Yeah. So it's really interesting. So I go to my cardiologist, starting to have these symptoms every day, and he gave me some new medication, and he gives me the exact same line. He's like, look, you're fine. There's nothing wrong with you. And I asked him specifically, can I exercise? He says, yes.
Mm-hmm.
So the next week, I'm on my bike, biking to work. And on the way to work, I have absolutely crushing pain. I collapse on the ground. I'm unable to get up from the ground. I have my phone. I dial 911, and they take me to the hospital. And it's the same cycle again. They start doing the same tests and getting the same results. And this time, I got a cath. And I found the Myocardial Bridge group on Facebook, and I had started to do research and like, hey, maybe this is it. You know, we don't have another explanation. And I know I have a myocardial bridge. Maybe this is it. So I started to do some research, started to think that maybe it was a myocardial bridge. And I asked, my cardiologist, do you think it's the myocardial bridge? And he does the catheterization, doesn't find any blockages, and he says, you have a myocardial bridge, but it's too minor to be causing your pain. And I'm getting worse. I'm getting worse week by week. So then I seek out the Stanford Second Opinion program. Shortly after the cath, I start filling out the paperwork for the Second Opinion program. I get a second opinion online from Dr. Schnitger, and she basically says, okay, we're going to schedule you to come in to Stanford, get a full round of testing, and schedule you for surgery, assuming that there's a good chance that we're going to want to go ahead and operate.
And you're in Florida, so for you to get to Stanford, that's not an easy trip in the first place.
No, it's not an easy trip. I am lucky in that Stanford was in. I have Florida Blue insurance or Blue Shield insurance,
yeah.
So Stanford was considered in network, even though they're out of state. So it's interesting. All of that was covered. All of that work was covered by my insurance. But yeah, we made a special trip out just for the testing. I knew I was getting worse, and my cardiologist didn't really have a clue as to why. So I knew I needed.
You actually did go to Stanford for the provocative test.
Yeah.
And what did you get out of that? What came from the?
Yeah, so this is where one of the twists in this story happens. I have great admiration for the people at Stanford. So I went to Stanford. I had their CT scan. So a new picture of my heart confirmed that I have a bridge. Then I did the stress echo, again confirmed that I had a positive result, that there's some abnormality when my heart is beating fast. And then I go to the cath lab, and they want to do the stress test where they test for the amount of flow that's going through your bridged artery.
Yeah, the acetylcholine and dopamine test.
Yeah, the dopamine test, that's right. Measuring the flow, the flow factor through that artery. They can't do it because I have a forked LAD artery and it's too small.
They can't get the wire in for the flow rate.
Yeah, I can't get the wire in. So even though the cath showed I have a bridge and the stress echo showed that it was symptomatic, Dr. Schnitger said, we can't operate on you because we have not confirmed that your bridge is causing your pain. And I was devastated. I was devastated because by June, my pain was getting worse and worse. And I wasn't one of these people who, in February, I was not ready to have surgery, but by June came around, I was ready. I was getting desperate. And now I'm like, okay, what am I supposed to do? What am I supposed to do? And the diagnosis was very complicated because they said, yes, you have a bridge. Yes, it's causing the symptoms. But they also said, you also have vasospasms.
Yes.
And you also have microvascular disease. And therefore, any one of these three things could be causing the chest pain. So,
And we know any one of those three things could be causing the chest pain, but any one of those three things could be caused by the bridge.
Yes.
As we find in so many cases.
And so, I'm a double outlier, right? Because myocardial bridge is an outlier, but now I have a forked myocardial bridge.
Right.
Which, not a lot of people have dealt with. So, I spent the summer trying to see if lifestyle changes could make a difference. Maybe they can, but I wasn't able to move the needle. I was just getting worse. I had decided by about August, September, I had decided I needed to find a surgeon. I started to look for surgeons. I wanted to push it off till December just for convenience purposes, but it just kept getting worse and it was interrupting. I wasn't able to finish a day of work. I canceled meetings. I'd go home on the middle of the day. I'd have attacks of pain while talking to someone. It was, it's the most disruptive, with no predictability. It's the most disruptive thing. And it's really hard to talk to someone and say, hey, you know what? I'm having crushing pain right now. I can't talk with you.
Right. And they look at you and they say, but you look fine. You can't.
Yeah, right.
True.
I can't tell you how many people told me you look fine, you look great. And I'm like, it doesn't matter how I look.
Right. Well, to the same, I think from the same perspective, we look at somebody who's having a severe migraine. We understand what a migraine is, and they're telling us, I'm in excruciating pain. I can't speak with you right now, or I can't talk, or I got to go home. We get that. But when you say it's your heart, they're like, well, no, if you have a heart problem, you're going to pass out. You're going to go down. Or something like that. You can't be your heart. Are you stupid? Why would you be still functioning if it's hurting you like that? And for the benefit of the people who maybe are just listening to this episode, this is so common that once the symptoms start, they tend to progress and get worse in some cases, almost compounding the speed with which the pain exaggerates. So you got there.
Just remembering that, I had a meeting with my colleagues and we were going to lunch and we were standing outside, we were waiting for lunch. And I started having pain and I said, I'm sorry, I can't stand here anymore. I've got to go. And that was really when I realized I can't put this off. I can't put this off any longer. I've got to do this as soon as possible. And around that same time, I can't remember if it was earlier or slightly later, Dr. Theo Kofidis gave a free webinar for the Facebook group, Myocardial Bridge Facebook group. And I attended that webinar and I was very impressed. And I scouted out a couple of other surgeons as well, but ended up selecting Dr. Kofidis, which of course meant traveling to Greece. Surgery. That's been the most number one question that people have asked me. Why did you go to Greece?
Well, and take a step back just for a second. If I'm not mistaken, you actually found a couple of surgeons regionally that would be willing to have unroofed you, correct?
Yes. Dr. Alan Stewart is in Miami and he does these surgeries. He's a very proficient surgeon. I talked with him. I talked with Dr. Guy. Dr. Guy's team also turned me down for surgery. So, it's interesting when you have a myocardial bridge, not only do you have to figure out the diagnosis, you have to find the surgeons who are willing to work with you. Some of them are going to, like Stanford, are going to say no.
Yeah, that complication of the forked bridge, in some cases, if they don't feel 100%, they don't want to challenge, the situation and put you at risk either. And then there's others who understand it a little bit differently, are willing to go in and see what they can do. So you get a vacation to Greece.
Yeah. So I scheduled surgery with Dr. Kofidis at St. Luke's Hospital
One thing I know that Dr. Kofidis is giving people, he will do a free analysis. He'll speak with you as a consultation after you send him your CT scan. So did you go through that process first?
Yes. Dr. Kofidis will do a free consultation. That's correct. And sent him my images from Stanford, the 3D images which Stanford produces. And so, and other files that he requested. Mm-hmm. And I think that gave him enough confidence that he could handle this case.
So we're in November now?
Well, yeah, probably that consultation was in October, and then the surgery was scheduled for November.
So the good news is he was not only in agreement that he felt he could make a difference for you, he was actually willing to get you in relatively quickly, because for some people, especially in the Stanford program, they may be waiting 6, 8, 9 months, a year, depending on the situation. And here you are from consult to surgery, maybe a month, 5 weeks.
Yeah, it was very fast. We went back and forth on the timing. He is a professor in Singapore, and he also practices in Greece. And he had to work around his schedule. I was very glad to have it done so quickly, but the scheduling was essentially based on his existing travel schedule. So he said, I have a slot here. You can either do it in November in this window, or you can wait till January. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to do November. I don't want to wait till January.
I think we all can relate. If you get two options, one sooner than later, the sooner is the one you're going to choose. Once we get to that tipping point of, there's a fear you could die. We don't know. And there's no surgeon that will say, no, you won't. And, so in our own best interest and self-advocacy, I think everybody I've spoken with, and even everybody I've seen on the Facebook group, except for those people who are so fearful of the process, they really want to do what they can as quickly as they can.
Well, let me say this. I wasn't super afraid of dying. My life had been taken away, right? I was no longer able to work. I was no longer able to go for a walk, the lowest level of exercise. I was spending multiple hours lying on the couch in pain. So, I didn't necessarily think I was going to die. I just felt like I had no life.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I remember the littlest strain, bending over to do the laundry would cause a surge of pain. So much disability. I just can't. I just couldn't bear it.
Yeah, there was no quality of life whatsoever.
Yeah, no quality of life.
So you get to Greece, you have your surgery. Let me ask, I know Dr. Kofidis he does minimally invasive surgery as well as what's necessary in some cases, a full sternotomy. What was your situation?
Yeah, it's interesting. I asked him if we might be better off doing a sternotomy, and he said, no, I like to do minimally invasive. He prefers minimally invasive. But then he looked at my case closely, and my artery is very small. And in fact, it goes from the left ventricle to slightly over the right ventricle. And he said, look, in your case, there's a chance of cutting the heart and causing some bleeding, and I need to be able to get in there and fix it. Sew it up if that happens. So because of my specific physiology, he actually recommended a full sternotomy.
Mm-hmm. And how long was that process? How long were you in Greece from surgery to exit and your ability to return home?
Yeah, so I was in the hospital for 1 week, and then I was in Greece for another week. They wanted to make sure that I was sufficiently stable before making that international flight or series of international flights. I will say that even after 2 weeks, I was quite fatigued. My wife wheelchaired me through all the airports. I probably couldn't have done it without her as my caregiver at that time.
Mm-hmm. Did you notice post-surgery any difference? How quickly was it that you realized, man, something's different? This is great, or this hurts? Whatever.
Yeah. So, I've read a lot of stories of people who the day after, or maybe a couple of days after, they immediately feel this intense relief. And my case was much more gradual. I started to feel improvement in the pain. I did start to feel some improvement in the pain right away, but it was more like a gradual improvement. And the shortness of breath actually got worse immediately after the surgery. The way I describe it to my friends is it's like you have a brand new heart and a brand new lungs that have never been used before, and you have to train them to work from the beginning. That's what it felt like. I was always out of breath that first 2 weeks, always. But it came back pretty quickly. And what I'm really amazed now, because I was expecting, because my physiology is complex, because my diagnosis is complex, I was expecting maybe I would get like a 40 or 50% improvement. I feel like I've got a 90, 95%. I can't believe how successful. Just every day I'm bowled over.
Well, the good news is if you're 95, 90, 95 today, I would suspect a year from now, it'll be a memory.
Yeah.
A case. I still feel nothing from the heart, the sternum. I still
still feel the sternum. That's interesting.
I'm 2 years out, and I had some complications that they had to restructure some stuff, but it's weird because I'm still numb in the center. I can't feel anything.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And so I'll get these little, pinging pains.
Yeah.
They're not hard. They're sternal.
I was very sore in that area for, couldn't lie in certain ways, couldn't read certain ways for about 8 weeks. But it feels like it's totally gone. I feel like I could do anything now.
That's great.
Anything that the rest of my body can do. Which is
right. But keeping in mind that you have that year gap, you need to get some gradual work up to it. Otherwise, you're going to be one sad, sore person.
Yeah. I mean, I'm really eager to, like I mentioned, I'm really eager to start doing new things.
That's great.
The only reason I haven't gotten on my bike yet is just the timing hasn't been right yet. Mentally, I'm ready.
Good.
I will say that I love my daily walk. I mean, we live next to a park, and I just, it's not just physical, it's spiritual, I guess.
Have you noticed the way you used to walk versus the way you walk today is different?
Yeah. I mean, yes. I don't think about it as much as when I first came out of surgery, but I think, every time I'm like, wow, this is so great.
Right. And I know it's a trite phrase, but you stop and smell the roses a little differently than
just, it's so great to walk without pain, without worrying about pain coming. I mean, that was, I was going to say that was the hardest thing, but no, it was all the hard. There wasn't one hard thing. Walking in nature, hiking, being outside. It's like my top passion. I want to be outside as much as I can. And not being able to do that was just devastating.
That's the greatest thing to hear. I mean, for me, for Dr. Kofidis, I'm sure.
Yes.
And I know he's engaged with the group, from a distance because he can't engage and give any advice. But I'm sure he just loves to hear these stories where the process that maybe was a little too risky or a little too concerning for others, where he's able to go in and do the procedure and it works. And this is just November, so you're 5 months out?
Yeah, I'm 5 months out, right? So I don't think I've reached my upper limit. I can walk without limit in terms of distance. I'm walking as fast as I've ever walked and having no pain. And a bit of a tangent, but I had quit caffeine entirely because that was one of the triggers. And I find that I'm actually able to drink a cup of tea now and still not have pain. So life's little pleasures,
Agreed. I did the same, and I love coffee, and I was never more than a cup a day guy, and not even every day. But when you don't know what's wrong with you, and most of us stop everything. I stopped any vitamins, I stopped supplements, I stopped everything, including coffee, anything that could have an effect. And it was that first cup, you're a little bit anxious. What's it going to do? Is my heart going to race? Do I dare have a cup of coffee? Because it seemed to create symptoms before. And I actually had my first cup in the hospital. It's like, okay, I'm going to try this while I'm here, as long as I'm, I've got somebody around me just in case. And I was thrilled that nothing happened.
Oh, that's
I
great.
I don't even know if it increased my heart rate at that point. So as you pass through your sternal precautions now and everything, you're driving, you could actually ride your bike if you chose to. Are you in cardiac rehab yet?
I did a couple weeks of cardiac rehab. And, it's mostly just cardiac exercise while wearing a monitor. And they never saw anything. Doesn't surprise me because they never saw anything before the surgery either. So they never saw anything that's concerning. So, after a couple of weeks, I felt like I can pretty much do this on my own. I mean, I haven't had a chance to do these things yet, but, I expect to start biking soon. I expect to start yoga again soon. I actually think I'm going to do some jogging again soon. So, I feel like I'm only constrained by the fact that I was sedentary for a whole year, right? I was lying down for a whole year. Now I'm coming back and able to do things, and I don't feel really constrained.
Can I ask you, you mentioned that insurance would cover Stanford because they were in network. Greece is out of country, so I'm sure that there was some challenges there. How did you go about the expense of the surgery and everything?
Yeah, so insurance did not cover any costs for surgery. I'm fortunate that we have some savings, some means. We just paid for it. We just paid for it out of pocket. I will say that paying for something out of pocket in Greece is probably a quarter or a fifth what it would be in the United States. There's a cost savings because it's in Greece, but it's a significant chunk of change. But, looking back, I can't think of any money that has been better spent in my whole
Well, that I would say at whatever cost your life, right?
Right. I got my life back. So that, there's almost no cost that wouldn't be worth that.
Yeah. And so many people, work, they spend their health to gain wealth, only to find at some point they're spending their wealth to get the health. And, in your case, it's great that you were able to be able to carry that.
Yeah, I feel very, very fortunate that we were able to live that cost.
So for the benefit of anybody that's now engaged in this discussion going, well, I can't find anybody locally. I don't want to wait 9 months to get to Stanford or a year, whatever the case may be. The Greece experience was a good one, all the way through from the hospital to the exit.
Yeah. So at St. Luke's Hospital, I was really amazed at the level of care that they provide. I've been, because of my heart condition, I've been in the hospital many, many times. And it was shocking to me to be in a hospital where you would push that call button and someone would come within 2 minutes. I've never experienced anything like that. It was phenomenal. The level of care was very high. I actually had a door to the outside, some fresh air. I got fresh air and nice food. It was a very good experience. The doctors were extremely professional throughout the entire experience and spoke perfect English. The hardest part was getting there and getting home. It's not that easy, and it's not that easy to do when you're feeling badly.
Right. Yeah, that even more so. That's the exaggeration right there. That's the exclamation point on it, to have to get on a plane and sit for 8, 10, 12 hours, assuming it was a direct, but you probably had to make a stop somewhere too, right?
Yeah, it was 3 legs. It was 3 legs total. Ugh. Yeah, we paid for the Economy Plus or something like that, so we have seats that have a little more space on the way there.
Yeah. Well, I think for anybody that's in this consideration, I will put the links to both Dr. Kofidis and St. Luke's in the episode show notes, so that if they choose to investigate it a little bit further, they'll have an ease of access and they don't have to go through a bunch of process to get there. Now that you're complete, 5 months out, can you give us an idea of how you feel? You said 90-95%, but tell us what that feels like. What are the sensations that are gone that you don't experience? How the shortness of breath is improved to where it's back to normal?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So I still have these little tinges of pain in my heart.
On that, are you clear those twinges of pain are tissue pain versus musculoskeletal pain from the sternotomy?
I don't think it's sternotomy.
Okay.
But I'm not sure it's angina either because, they cut the heart, right? So the heart is repairing itself. There's a scar there, right? There's a scar there. That could be it. It's interesting because one of the things that still triggers me a little bit is it can be stress. But what I'm experiencing now is, they ask you the pain on a scale of 1 to 10. Like I get the pain I'm feeling now is like a 1. And the other thing is it lasts very, very short amount of time. Like 5 minutes, 10 minutes, not hours and hours and hours, like I had before. And I can't, you know what? I don't even know that I regret having those things because it reminds me of what I've been through.
Right.
It reminds me of it wasn't all a dream. Sometimes it can feel like a dream because of how terribly I felt before and how normal I feel now. It almost can feel like a dream. It's like, wait, did this really happen? Did all of this drama really happen to me? It's almost a reminder, but I don't feel like I have any shortness of breath. And I don't feel like I don't have any pain while exercising. It's always been, even when it got bad, it was while exercising, but there's always a component to it that was just random. Just come out of nowhere, feel a twinge of pain. And that randomness is, I guess, still there. But I think the most important thing for me is I don't feel constrained. I don't feel constrained in my activities. I can fully embrace work. I can fully embrace physical activity without fear.
That's a wonderful outcome. And I'm so happy to hear that you're at that point, to the awareness of something. Every so often you get a little twinge or whatever that is maybe a bit familiar. For the benefit of those of us who have been through the surgery, yourself inclusive, the longer you get from it, the less you remember the significance of the pain. And at some point you're like, I kind of don't even remember. I know it was painful, but I don't really remember that. And I have to thank a guest that we had a while back, Dr. Peggy DeLong. She sent me this, she makes these little bracelets, gratitude bracelets.
Wow.
And I'm not a bracelet guy, but I said, okay, I'll wear the thing. And I found myself looking at it. There's a little silver bead on all these black beads as just a reminder because the pain's gone. And every time I see it, it reminds me to be grateful for something that's happened either in the day or at the moment, but always to remember that, I'm so blessed to be here because of the people that I'm surrounded by and the great medical care and the doctors who corrected the condition. And you'll get there too. You're already recognizing it. That little twinge is the reminder that, wow, it's that much better. And, how good is that?
Yeah. I am a huge admirer of medicine and medical science, but in some sense, I can't think of this as anything but a miracle.
I totally agree.
It's just a miracle. To have your life taken away and to get it back, in my mind, especially after being denied surgery at Stanford, I wasn't sure I was going to get it back.
Right.
I didn't have confidence that was going to happen. Amazing.
Yeah. I celebrate 2 birthdays now. The day I was really born and the day that I was reborn and given my life back as the surgical date. Yeah. And, people laugh when I say it, but I get to explain the story. One thing that I'm asking of all our guests now, because I think it's really important for the people who are listening who are not in the space yet to where they've either gotten a proper diagnosis or that they've gotten a diagnosis and they haven't gotten to a surgeon yet. What would you say to the people who are at the point of considering what their next steps should be? They maybe have an option now for surgery, but they're afraid to go forward, or they're just now diagnosed going, okay, now what? I've got this bridge, but everybody says it's benign.
Yeah. This is so tough. This is the struggle that we all go through. I think the first thing I want to say is that, I don't take the decision to go forward with surgery lightly. I think it's a serious decision and something you should give thought to. And the standard recommendation is give medicine 6 months, give it 6 months to try to work before you go forward with the surgery. But at the same time, once you've got a bridge, you realize you have a bridge, you really have to become your own doctor. I hate to say it, but it's true. You really have to become your own doctor. You're going to get a lot of advice that's not well informed. You're going to get a lot of advice that's based on conventional wisdom and not the latest knowledge. I did a count before our interview. I had 4 cardiologists tell me that my angina was not caused by myocardial bridge. 4 cardiologists. Guess what? I was right, and the 4 of them were wrong. Right? I mean, that's the truth. Right? We know that now. I've had the surgery, and I've had a 90, 95% recovery. Those 4 cardiologists were all wrong. The only way I got through all of those gatekeepers and found a cure, of course, Dr. Kofis is the hero of the story, but I had to be my own doctor. I had to read all the information about what is the myocardial bridge, why does it cause pain, what are the alternative explanations, what does my diagnosis material say, and I had to make my own decision. If I had relied on the local cardiologist to make my decisions, I would still be lying on the couch in pain today. So, you've got, unfortunately, with this condition, the other doctors are there for advice. They're there for advice, but you've got to call the shots. No one is going to do it for you. And it's terrible. It's like, in addition to being physically suffering, you've got to step up emotionally and mentally and take charge of the situation. I wish that wasn't the case, but it is. That's the reality, is that you have to step up, you have to take charge, and you have to call the shots, because unfortunately, the level of education on this is not very high, even among cardiologists. And, my question from the beginning was very simple. Okay, if it's not my myocardial bridge causing my chest pain, what is it? And no one could answer that question. And then I went to Stanford, and they confirmed that it was my myocardial bridge. They said, maybe you shouldn't have surgery, but they confirmed that it was the myocardial bridge causing at least some of my problem. That was enough for me to know that I needed to go forward.
I can't stress what you just said enough to anybody, that self-advocacy is everything with this condition, because you'll be pushed around, you'll be gaslit, you'll be dismissed, you'll be medicated, and you'll still have the symptoms. And to just remind everybody, it doesn't get better over time. It always deteriorates. There's nothing good that comes over waiting. You just have to keep pushing. And that's where the value of the Facebook group really comes in, because you've got that support group when you get exhausted and you get tired and you want to give up. There's somebody there to say there's hope. Just keep going. You'll find somebody who is going to properly diagnose you, because that's the first step in the process. And then you have to keep pushing and pushing and pushing.
The thing that I see on the Facebook group that worries me is so many people want to go local. They want to find the local person, the local surgeon. This condition, in my mind, is serious. You want to find the best person that you can afford. I have to say, I went to Greece, right? I was willing to go to Greece. Not everyone's willing to go to Greece. That's fine. But this is not something that you want to take the most convenient way out. You want to find the best person you can possibly find, both for diagnosis and for surgery, because you don't want to do this surgery twice. You want to do it once, right? You want to do it once, you find the best person. Don't try to go cheap or go fast or go. It's not a convenience thing. This is get it right the first time.
And there are some unfortunate stories where people have gone to somebody that said, "Oh, I can take care of this. Yeah, come on in, we'll get it done," and it failed. And then they're in a world of hurt, and it's not something you can go immediately back and get recorrected with somebody who is experienced. But
yes,
you have the healing process, the time in between with the symptoms still there, and then the next step of finding and ascertaining the maybe then you even have a bigger challenge of a doctor wanting to accept the case just because somebody else has already been in there, maybe messed something up and they don't know.
Yeah, of course, we both heard multiple stories of people who have had stents put in, which is not the right treatment. Some people have bypasses put in that don't work. So again, you want to go to the most knowledgeable, experienced person you can, and that's not always going to be your local surgeon.
Mm-hmm. Well, I appreciate your comments. I see so much that you share on the Facebook group, and it's just so welcome to see people who have had the surgery who are still connected and, giving hope and support to those who are not, who haven't had their surgery yet or are still in the process of diagnosis. So thank you for that. And thank you from the bottom of my imperfect heart for sharing your story with us and giving people hope who are in similar situations. And like I said, there's so many people just around me in a 90-mile radius that I keep running into who have either the condition and or have been unroofed. I'm sure you're going to find in the Florida space that there's more and more people that are going to come out and maybe will reach out to you in some way, shape, or form just to say, where did you go? What did you do? Can you help? And the fact that you're willing to do this says that you're engaged, for the greater good of all of us. And I really appreciate that.
Thank you. Yes. I guess the other thing I want to say is that the other thing you need to get through this is you need courage, right? And
yes,
I took courage from the Myocardial Bridge Facebook group, and I took courage from your podcast. So thank you.
Well, wonderful to have you. And I want to hear when you get on that first bike ride, okay?
Sure. I'll let you know. Sure. Absolutely. It'll be soon.
Excellent. Louis, thank you so much.
Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you for listening to Imperfect Heart. It's my hope that this information helped in some way to improve your situation or will help you better understand this condition. More importantly, that it gives you hope through stories that there is help and you most certainly are not alone. If you've been diagnosed with a myocardial bridge, please be sure to join the private Facebook group, Myocardial Bridge Support Group. For more information about our program or to reach me directly, visit the website, myimperfectheart.com. If you like what you heard today, please give a positive review, thumbs up, high five, or whatever your app likes. And be sure to share with everyone important to you so they understand what it is you're dealing with. Please subscribe as well. Welcome each day with gratitude and positivity. The views and opinions expressed in this program are solely those of the host and the guest and are not intended to provide, nor are they a suitable substitute for, professional care by a doctor, therapist, mental health professional, or other qualified medical professional. Imperfect Heart is a production of Hear Me Now Studios.